what does it actually take, right, to let AI touch production network infrastructures?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the ONUG Collaborative Working Group Use Case Updates. So this is really for, we wanted to share with everyone. All of the vendor community is now about to enter into the working groups after myself, Peter, and many others have been working very hard during the summer, doing our summer project around taking the use cases that were developed during the last board meeting and creating some really useful projects for the industry. So first, I am Nick Lippis, one of the co-founders and co-chairs at ONUG. And Peter, why don't you say hi?
Yep. Hi, Peter Campbell. I'm a security researcher and advisor to the working groups at ONUG.
Awesome. Peter, you're more than just an advisor. You're kind of like running a lot of the working groups, and I'm so happy to have you involved. You add such a great dimension, perspective, and to keep everything kind of moving along. So
no, thank you, Nick. And this has been fun. You talked about a summer project. This has kind of been like summer camp, right? So we're starting on our journey here.
Yeah, and I tell you, I love our working groups. I gain so much insight from what we're doing in the working groups than on almost anything other than the conference itself. So
I agree. You know what's really unique, and I know we'll get into it a little bit more, Nick, but I mean, it's really got a practitioner focus to it, doesn't it, right? These are people who are actually out there, implementing and feeling some of the pain as well as they're, bringing solutions forward, AI-driven solutions. And we're going to talk a lot about that.
Yeah, I think what you'll see, and in terms of the audience, you'll see is a real life, because like all the folks who are participating in the working groups are not folks who are saying, oh, I'm thinking about doing that. I'd like to see this, it's like, I think this is how it's going to work. These are the folks who are actually doing it. So it is so much different when you have real practitioners who are struggling with a lot of these topics. So let's get into it. First, I want to kind of give you a perspective on kind of how the working groups were established. This is ONUG. This is the largest organization of IT executives within the industry that are collaborating together. So if you're not familiar with ONUG or so, we have it represents about 600 plus of the global 2000. Combined spend of IT is about $1.5 trillion. So it's a very big buying block in our industry. Most being over almost nearly 90% have budget purchasing authority. And we've been at this for a while. So we have market permission to lead, so that comes with gaining trust within the industry. So as I mentioned a second ago, just mentioned all of those things. Who is in the working groups right now? These are mostly ONUG board members or folks who are leaders within the industry. So we have representation from a whole group of companies that have had input into what you're kind of about to see. So like I said, very practitioner focused. The key thing about the working groups is that when we start them, the way they come to be or they get created is that we have a board meeting that occurs the day before the AI Networking Summit. Every board member brings one or two use cases to that board meeting. They present those to the rest of the board members, and then so that everyone has a good understanding of what they are. And then we put them all on kind of like, big sticky easel, kind of like the large ones, all around the room. There may be some 20 or so use cases, and we give basically only 10 little red stickies, and these are the ones that you peel off and then you can actually stick them on. A little old school, but it works because you get a really great visual when it's done. So what that voting actually does, that it basically certifies that this is what the ONUG board feels is important for not just them, because they can't solve these problems on their own. They need the industry to start focusing on that. What it also communicates is that this is propensity to buy. This is budget development for these areas that they are mostly concerned about and that they want the entire community to start focusing their minds on. So use cases built by consumers in the large enterprise, putting their requirements against them and looking to buy. So the work that we're doing in the working groups, take those use cases, which are very, is like on like one kind of bulletin or one kind of like large sticky, right? Not a little sticky, like, a big one, like an easel size. And then we start to have a lot of discussion about them. So we developed 4 working groups, and we're really active in 3 right now. The 4th one we held off for a little bit. We'll probably start that either later in the fall or early winter timeframe.
Now, Nick, if I was just going to interject for a second. So as we're going through, as the board meets, I mean, you're looking at a kind of a theme, right, that might get put onto the onto a whiteboard, and people put stickies next to it. They voted. They've gotten to these, say, these 3 themes here. And then the working groups really get together and refine that further, correct?
Yeah. I'm absolutely. Yeah. Refine it, define it, create problem statements and reference architectures and so forth. So, thank you, Peter, for that. And I think this kind of shows how the votes went. So we have, we call WG1 or Working Group 1. That's the Agentic Control Plan. That was the most concentrated and highly demanding one. There's the AI-enabled SOC. And then there's also AI network and autonomous infrastructure. So a couple of words on these before we kind of dive in, right, Peter? So one, WG2, we kind of splitting that into 2 different areas. There's the ONUG Connect work, and that has to do a lot around provisioning of wide area networking services. And then on the autonomous infrastructure, that's a real focus on the NOC. And most of this is really looking at kind of a post-Mythos, a post, patch storm world where that becomes the new norm, where in essence, operations now needs to be just like, in essence, part of a CI/CD pipeline. And so how do you get ready for that? How do you deal with that? And that's really where we're spending a lot of our time and focus. Peter, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, because I remember being in the room as we were selecting, as we went through the voting, and I think it'll be interesting for people to see kind of where we've landed and how things have started to, how we've begun to shape things through the working groups and the way that these 3 working groups sort of tie together.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. All right, great. So those are the 4. So we're going to give kind of updates, on the working groups. WG1, Agentic Control Plane, extremely important, activity. This is the most highly, needed area. A lot of this has to do with security, creating an agentic fabric as well. So we'll talk a lot about that. And then into various different domains. So there's domain 1, which is autonomous networking, which is the NOC, and then also the SOC. Peter, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think just going really back to Agentic Control Plane as being kind of the umbrella atop the other working groups. And I know there's been a lot of panic and concern, maybe that's too strong of a word, around sort of like what people have been seeing in the news recently with OpenAI and Hugging Face. I think this is really the time to begin, solving these problems, right? And that's really what the working groups are focused on, is, fact-based and approaches like this to solve problems.
Okay, great. Well, let's dive into the, it's called WG1 affectionately. This is kind of the working group 1. So this got 10 board votes. Again, there are about 44 vendors in the scope of this whole area. So a lot of focus and interest in this. So what we decided to do, as we kind of looked at, this actually is a really large space. There's a whole focus around reimagining the wide area, both in terms of design, and then also around the automation of the procurement, and that's the ONUG Connect work. So we're kind of splitting that out. And so what we decided to do here, from a lot of input from the community, was we really need the Network Operations Center to get ready for a much quicker pace for both patch management, but also in terms of the kind of flows that are going to be occurring across it, both within the data center and also in the wide area, and to almost like reimagine and rethink the Network Operations Center, which is a big space in and of itself. That's where we focused on. We developed a reference architecture now for that, and this is really getting us ready for autonomous infrastructure. So I wouldn't say infrastructure that runs itself yet, but this, I think, is an architecture that will get us there. Do you agree, Peter?
No, I think what it is, because of the practitioner lens we put on this, it's really a common sense approach for kind of moving in that direction, right? To sort of AI assisted, network operations, and what does that look like? So that's really what we're going to be focusing on.
Okay, great. All right, ready? Little drum roll. Here is the reference architecture that's been developed. Oh, sorry. I got too many slides in this one deck. So this is the autonomous operations. And so, Peter, why don't you take the first? This is part of this.
This is great. I mean, this is what, really working group 2, we landed on a very simple idea, right, Nick? Before we build anything, we need to plan and understand what the agent's persona is going to be. I mean, this is something that we think is just so important. And that's why it's called out you can see it in purple, as far as we can't do anything below, right? It's in fine print, so you know what you're going to allow. So anything down in the red can't be done. Think of something as simple as, well, not simple, but let's say firewall changes, right? It's an operational process. It happens either multiple times a day, right? Hundreds or thousands of firewall changes per day or per week in a large organization, right? And you may be asked by your manager, hey, let's create an AI, let's operationalize this with AI. Well, there's a lot that you really need to think about on the agent persona side, and that's really what you see here is what level of autonomy does the agent get? Meaning, is the agent just going to observe what's happening, make recommendations, or are we going to move more into hybrid mode where we're allowing the agent to take some type of action, right? Yeah. Within boundaries. But I mean, there's a lot of decisions there. That's going to determine kind of the level of effort it's going to take in the box below to build, what you would want to build. And there's going to be a cost associated with that. So those are some of the things that we are really focused on. Which models are we going to use, right? Are we going to use, are we mature enough in our own operation to have on-premise models? Or are we reaching out to frontier models to make decisions? What are the risks associated with that? How do we spent a lot of time already. We've had a few meetings, but really talking about how do we roll back changes that are made by the agent. What happens if the team is not really understanding, if there's no transparency around what actions the agent has decided to take. So that's where we'll really get into, I think, what Nick's going to cover and talk to below is more of the Agentic Operations Loop, which we think is really critical to, and I talk a little bit about how to do this safely and responsibly in a common sense way, right? So you can explain it to your leader, to your management, to your senior leadership around what you're intending to do, because I'm sure they'll have the same questions.
Yeah. So I wanted to amplify a few things that Peter said. So everything in the front, in the purple box, that is planning. It is so fundamental and so important. So you're going to have multiple different agents, and they're going to have multiple different personas, right? There could be maybe a configuration agent. There could be a an agent that just kind of like looks at, S flows. There could be agents that do change management or do a kind of a management chain requirement around change management. There's going to be n different personas, within your organization, and you need to think through what each and every persona is going to do, right? Because that will grant that, then you'll know what kind of rights to grant to those agents, and then what kind of resources that they should have access to, and that's going to be bound by it. And then you need to think about, okay, well, each one of those agents need to have a certain level of autonomy. And Peter talked to this. The way I kind of view this, we have it as L0, 1, 2, 3. And L0 is, okay, hey, it's just taking a look, looking at things. L1 is that it's looking, but it sees something, and it's like, okay, it's going to recommend that you do it. A human does it. L2 is that you're going to give it some access to do some task automated without, and we'll talk about what those might be. L3 is God mode, right? That is like that. They can auto act. It can basically has access to lots of different resources, and you're going to let it, kind of like go full autonomy. So this is a path, a road towards autonomous infrastructure. Peter talked about the models and their location. So we're anticipating a world of both private models, that are open source, open weight models, and then also the frontier models. So having a blend of them. And then also too, what is actually under management? So listing all of those things that you want. Is it the whole data center? Is it a piece of the data center? Is it the wide area, branch offices, containers, container networking, so forth, and so on. So this is the most important part. You really need to do the whole planning piece of this before you go into the build. And for the vendor community, a lot of the vendors have thought through a lot of these things as well. And so that's a really good opportunity for them to participate and kind of like provide you options and choices on how to move forward. So great. So we do all of that. You do all of that. And then, okay, well then everything in the red here, and it's all contained. Nothing escapes this is really kind of like the thing, the thinking, behind this. But this is really around access enforcement and audit, right? And we've kind of looked at, there's probably two different models that that are currently in the industry and that also may emerge. And there may be another one that emerges, and maybe some hybrid as well. But on pattern A, that is more agent to agent. That's much more distributed. There's no kind of controller, that the agents need to go and consult to. So, and in there, these agents then have access to a wide range of tools, and maybe those are through MCP servers, or maybe they're kind of direct access. So all the telemetry and log data that is associated with the estate under management, of their particular rule sets, the ACLs and so forth, they need access to those, or some particular agents and personas may need access to that. What are the sources of truth that your company, identifies, right? And then a group maybe of agents and MCPs to do spawn particular tasks. That's one pattern of A, so that's more distributed. The other is more of an orchestrator kind of model, and that's actually almost like where the agentic control plane that's in our working group number 1 is kind of focused on. So this is an orchestrator and API gateway, and in here, this orchestrator will get requests from various different agents, and then it will act upon them. So it will provide access into API calls into like all of these boxes over like in pattern A. Peter, you want to add anything to that?
No, I would say also, there's a lot of SaaS tools that are being used today. So I think the orchestrator would be involved in routing any of those requests out to, outside of the company to any SaaS platforms as well. Whether those requests are granted or not, will need to be based on policy decisions that you make. But these are the where that pattern B that Nick talked about fits in.
Yeah. Okay. So those are all of kind of the tools, resources that the agents will require to do their job. But then we also we identified, okay, what is the operations loop for an agent, and where do you basically feel comfortable, maybe where an agent has a persona to act without human interaction, and then where does human interaction come in from? So let's dive into that. You want to kind of guide everyone through this one, Peter?
Yes. So to kind of build on what Nick was talking about on the prior slide is like, what does it actually take, right, to let AI touch production network infrastructure? So this is where the working group has really been pressure testing this idea. And that's where this Agentic Operations Loop, that's why it's named Agentic Operations Loop, obviously, but, there's a decision criteria here that needs to be met around based on the blast radius, based on the level of autonomy, based on, do we want to see a dry run before something gets executed? It's many cases, right? It would be something where, hey, we don't want Agentic AI to do this at all, right? We may want to have AI propose something, but a human's actually going to implement it, right? And there's also controls as well, as far from an audit perspective. What are we going to allow? What are we not going to allow? So there's been a lot of discussions there, and I'll tell you, some of the operational lessons that we've been discussing have been pretty blunt, right, Nick? As far as some of what have been seen around hallucination rates on frontier models were, have been observed, right, to be fairly high, right, and that's concerning.
Yeah.
So these are some of the areas where we're talking about and really focusing. That's why we're really focused, I think, more on a hybrid model right now, especially for agentic network operations. So, and I think that's a sensible approach based on where we are today, where the market is today, and that's, I think, where we're looking for some vendor input as well to really understand what they're building towards, what their roadmaps look like. How does that align with this?
Yeah.
Right, because this is practitioner built and practitioner vetted.
Yeah. So it's, totally agree with like all of that, Peter. And I think, really on the vendor side, clearly everyone is kind of struggling with this. So there's no bad ideas, everyone's looking for options and choices. And how do we kind of move all of this forward? From a practitioner point of view, the more requirements that are identified and put into this, then the better utility this will be for the industry, and the quicker, frankly, potentially the quicker that the industry can move towards really true autonomous infrastructure. But I think this provides a framework and a reference architecture to move us all towards that.
Yeah, and one other thing to add is really another thing that's come up is sort of, the government has been asking or maybe requiring people to start thinking about AI kill switches and so on. This is another thing that we've been debating within the working group. And, these are just some of the things that you're probably hearing. If you work in this industry, you're probably hearing a lot of talk about that here. We're, bringing practitioners together to really talk through this.
Awesome. We want you to get involved, as well. And that's really easy to do. You just come up to the onug.net/collaborative, and you'll see this page. And then on this page, you're an IT corporate or collaborative member. Just request to join the collaborative. Just click on that. You'll kind of fill out a quick form, there, and then, they'll ask you for like which working group you want to get involved in. And that's really it. And so, and then we'll get back in touch with you around getting involved. Okay. Peter, any last words?
No, I would say any questions, please reach out. Happy to answer and address any questions that people have. I think the idea is that, if we get more involvement, more practitioners involved specifically, we can really provide something that's going to be really great that you can bring back to your company.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, everyone.